You're told that sharing your life creates connection and builds meaningful relationships with others. What if I told you constant visibility actually traps you in permanent performance anxiety? This sounds wrong because we believe transparency builds trust and openness creates authentic community. But there's something that doesn't quite add up. Why do people who share everything seem more anxious than those who share nothing? The visibility trap works by making privacy feel like isolation rather than safety. You can't exist without documenting because undocumented experiences don't count socially. Think about the last meaningful moment you had. Did you experience it, or did you immediately think about how to present it? The system creates two completely different relationships with existence depending on visibility expectations. For older generations, privacy meant safety because mistakes stayed private and life happened offline. For younger generations, privacy means isolation because if you're not visible, you literally don't exist. Same word. Completely opposite psychological meaning and completely opposite anxiety patterns. This explains something curious about how different generations experience the same situations. Subscribe to Prof. Jung. Explained if you want to see how visibility norms affect mental health. Share this with someone who can't stop documenting their life but feels increasingly empty. Private people live experiences directly without mediation. Visible people live experiences through documentation and presentation. Same events, completely different internal reality and psychological cost. Consider how each group handles a vacation. The private person goes somewhere and experiences it directly through their senses. They might take a few photos for personal memory, but the experience is primary. The visible person goes somewhere and immediately starts thinking about content creation. Every moment gets evaluated for its documentation potential rather than its experiential value. One person has a vacation, the other person produces vacation content. The documentation priority creates what psychologists might call the experience displacement effect. You're so focused on capturing and presenting the moment that you never fully inhabit it. The sunset becomes a photo opportunity rather than a direct experience. The meal becomes content rather than nourishment. The conversation becomes a story you'll tell rather than a connection you're having. But here's where the strategy becomes more sophisticated. Visibility doesn't just change how you experience moments. It fundamentally alters your relationship with authenticity itself. When everything is documented and presented, you start performing even private moments. You can't be alone without being aware that you're alone. You can't feel sad without framing how that sadness would look documented. Your inner life becomes a rehearsal for potential public presentation. Do you ever catch yourself narrating your own life as if someone is watching? The internal audience reveals the trap. Visible people develop a constant sense of being observed even when alone. This creates what researchers call surveillance anxiety, where you monitor yourself perpetually. Private people don't have this internal observer. They can be unself-consciously themselves because no presentation is required. The system also exploits what we might call the validation dependency cycle. When you share everything, you receive feedback constantly. Likes, comments, reactions. This feedback becomes your primary way of knowing if experiences were valuable. Without the feedback, you can't assess whether the experience mattered. Private people assess experiences internally through how they felt. Visible people assess experiences externally through how others responded. Consider how different types process a personal achievement. The private person feels proud internally and shares selectively with close people. The pride comes from the achievement itself. The visible person posts about the achievement and waits for responses. The pride comes from the validation received rather than the achievement itself. One person's satisfaction is internally generated. The other person's satisfaction depends on external metrics. The external validation dependency means visible people can't enjoy anything until others confirm it's enjoyable. You can't know if the restaurant was good until people like your food photos. You can't know if your vacation was fun until the posts get engagement. The experience itself becomes secondary to its social reception. Private people enjoy things in the moment based on direct experience. They don't need social confirmation to know what they liked. But there's something even more insidious about how visibility destroys spontaneity. Spontaneous moments require unself-conscious action. When you're always aware of potential documentation, you can't be spontaneous. Everything gets filtered through the question of how it would look presented. This kills genuine moments before they can happen. You can't dance badly, laugh weirdly, or exist imperfectly because imperfection is documented failure rather than human normalcy. The perfection pressure creates permanent stress because you can never relax into being imperfect. Private people can be messy, awkward, or strange without it mattering socially. Those moments stay private and don't define their social identity. Visible people must maintain consistent performance because every moment contributes to their documented identity. One slip, one bad photo, one awkward video becomes permanent public record. Have you ever deleted photos of yourself just existing because they didn't present you correctly? The curation obsession reveals how visibility destroys authentic self-expression. You can't just exist anymore. You must exist correctly according to presentation standards. Private people can exist however they feel in the moment. Visible people must exist according to how that existence will be perceived when documented. The system maintains itself through what we might call the invisibility punishment. When you're not visible, you feel left out of social reality. Everyone else is sharing and connecting through visibility. If you're private, you're excluded from these connection mechanisms. This creates pressure to participate in visibility even when it causes anxiety. You must choose between privacy-induced isolation or visibility-induced performance stress. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect involves how visibility changes memory formation. Memories used to form through direct experience. You remembered how things felt, smelled, sounded. Now memories form through documentation. You remember the photos you took rather than the experience itself. This means your past becomes a curated collection of presented moments rather than lived experiences. There's also a temporal dimension where visibility destroys presence. Private people can be fully present because the moment isn't being evaluated for presentation. Visible people are never fully present because part of their attention is always on documentation and framing. They're simultaneously experiencing and directing their own life documentary. This split attention prevents deep immersion in anything. Consider how different types handle emotional moments. The private person cries, gets angry, or feels joy without thinking about how it looks. The emotion is direct and unmediated. The visible person feels emotion, but immediately thinks about whether to document it and how to frame it. Should I post about this? How do I present this feeling? The emotion gets interrupted by presentation considerations before it's fully experienced. The emotional interruption means visible people never have clean emotional experiences. Everything is mediated through presentation potential. This creates emotional flatness over time because you're never fully in any feeling. Private people have intense emotional lives because feelings aren't filtered through documentation considerations. They feel things completely without worrying about how those feelings would present. But there's another layer that makes visibility particularly destructive. It creates identity confusion because your documented self and actual self diverge. The person you present online isn't quite you. It's a curated version emphasizing certain aspects. Over time, you forget which version is real. Are you the documented person or the private person? The gap between these creates psychological fragmentation. The identity fragmentation means visible people often feel like frauds. The presented version gets positive feedback but feels fake. The private version feels real but seems unworthy of presentation. Neither version feels fully authentic. Private people don't have this split. Their identity is unified because there's no gap between private self and presented self. This creates what sociologists call the authenticity paradox. The more you present your authentic self, the less authentic you become. Authenticity requires not thinking about perception. Curating authenticity for presentation stops it being authentic. Private people can be authentic because nobody's watching. Visible people only perform authenticity versions. The performance requirement extends to failure and struggle. Private people fail privately and recover without public documentation. Visible people must decide how to present failures. Share vulnerably and risk looking weak, hide it and maintain successful image. Either choice is strategic presentation. There's also a friendship dimension where visibility changes friendship meaning. Private friendships build through shared experiences and mutual support. Visible friendships build through public association and documented interaction. You're friends for the story rather than the connection. Do your friendships exist more in photos together than in actual time spent together? The documentation priority reveals how visibility hollows out relationships. You collect people who look good in your content rather than people who support you privately. The friendships become performative. You're friends for the story it tells rather than the connection it provides. Can you think of anyone who became more authentic by sharing more of themselves publicly? The authenticity pattern reveals the paradox. The more you share, the less authentic you become because sharing requires curation. Curation requires hiding parts that don't fit the narrative. You become a character in your own life story rather than the person living it. There's also a reversal where privacy used to be default and visibility was special. Now visibility is default and privacy is luxury. You must actively opt out of documentation rather than opt in. This reversal changes the psychological weight. Private people used to be normal. Now they're suspicious. What are you hiding? Why aren't you sharing? The burden of proof shifted from justifying visibility to justifying privacy. The privacy as luxury creates class dimensions. Wealthy people can afford privacy because their status is secure. They don't need social media validation. Poor people must stay visible to maintain relevance and opportunity. Invisibility means being forgotten in social and professional networks. One class can choose privacy, the other class cannot afford it. This explains why celebrities increasingly guard their privacy while regular people overshare. The celebrity already has status and doesn't need validation through visibility. The regular person needs visibility to feel like they exist socially. Privacy becomes a marker of having already made it. Visibility becomes a marker of still needing to prove yourself. The system perpetuates itself because people who achieve visibility success get celebrated as proof that sharing works. Those who struggle with visibility anxiety get blamed for not presenting correctly rather than questioning whether constant visibility itself is psychologically sustainable. Meanwhile, people who maintain privacy get dismissed as disconnected when they're actually just experiencing life directly without mediation. And perhaps most remarkably, the system has convinced people that privacy equals having something to hide, when actually privacy just means having a self that exists beyond performance and presentation requirements, where you can be imperfect, unself-conscious, and fully present without every moment becoming content that requires curation.